Cheap and cheerful, and today it's time for another mega review. This time, portable soldering irons. By request, I'll be looking at 8 of the most popular and frequently bought spicy sticks on the market today. Everything from the $5 sketchy specials to the all-time favourites and the newer 100-watt models. There's so much I've learned in this one that I'll distill into a quick 15-minute video with all the usual stats, charts, and practical tests so you can decide what to buy or how to get the most out of the one you've got. All that and more coming up next. Firstly, I need to clear up 2 things. For the Americans watching, when I'm saying solder in my terrible Aussie accent, what I mean in American speak is solder. I've got no idea why you call it solder, but there you go, that's what it is. Second, I selected and purchased all of these myself on AliExpress using someone else's money, the best kind of money. So thanks to AliExpress for helping me pay for most of this stuff, except for the Fnirsi, which they sent at my request, and a few cheapies, which are from my own private collection of electronic landfill. In the ring today, we have successor to the legendary TS100. It's the Miniware TS101 plus the brand new TS21 released just a couple of months ago. The Pinecil V1, or is it? Big boy toy Fnirsi HS02A, and I'll explain the O2B, the popular Alientek T80P and the regular T80, the ANENG SL108 and the even cheaper CS200S, and this little thing. So first, I'll be testing the heat up time, the power draw, the heat soak, and then soldering some XT60 plugs. Then I'll look at each one in more detail, along with its test results. But first, I've got to tell you about the Pinecil drama. So basically, this thing isn't what it appears to be. It's a fake, a phony, a 2-bit charlatan, as are all Pinecils sold on AliExpress, yet they still sell like hotcakes. You see, back in 2020, after the original smart iron, the TS100, was released, the Pine64 company decided to make their own version with open source and RISC chips.
With blackjack and hookers!
And they nailed it. The Pinecil was born, and it was good. But then China did what China does and reverse engineered the ever-loving shit out of it, cranking them out like a young bloke who just discovered incognito, and that's fine for open source software and hardware, but they also copied the logo, the trademarks, and the packaging. Very naughty. Of course, the Pine64 guys were understandably pissed and immediately threw all their toys out of the pram, never to be seen on AliExpress again. Today, you can only buy the real Pinecil V2 at their website, link in the description. I tried ordering that, but fast postage to Australia was 3 times the cost of the iron, so bugger that. We'll have to make do with this one, but I do not condone the purchasing of counterfeits. If you like it, buy the original, link in the description. So let's get on to testing. Test 1. Power draw. I spent the whole weekend testing all the irons with my Fnirsi USB tester, cycling through dozens of different cables and USB-C bricks. First surprise was every single iron came with a cable that couldn't meet their power claims. You've got to pay extra just to reach what's on the box. However, even with a proper 100-watt cable and a confirmed 100-watt Fnirsi USB-C brick, my tester wasn't showing any more than 68 watts max, well short of the claimed 100 watts of several irons. Finally, I switched over to this beast of a power bank I've reviewed before, and boom, the TS21 flashed 102 watts. For exactly 1 second before it completely shat itself with an error code, and the smaller power bank I used to test it suddenly got red hot, forcing me to run outside and chuck it on the ground. A full 2 hours later, it was still over 100 degrees Celsius inside, and the screen's completely screwed. Thankfully, my larger power bank has its own watt meter on the front, so testing direct without the line filter finally gave me a steady 100 watts. However, the Fnirsi HS02A was only hitting 70 watts. Surely they weren't telling porky pies. Digging through the menus, I found a power setting, cranked it to 100%, and now it hits 110 watts. So, results after testing everything. The Fnirsi was leader at 110 watts, followed by the Miniware TS101 and ANENG SL108, which both delivered at least 100 watts, more than their marketing. Okay, so this is the TS21. I've seen it do 100 watts before, but it's so fast in heating up that most of the time it doesn't even reach 100 watts before it hits its temperature. So it's really hard to capture on camera. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Then you've got the Alientek 80P at 75 watts, the fake Pinecil at 45 watts, and the battery-powered models at 8 watts. Test number 2, heat up time to 350 degrees Celsius or 660 Fahrenheit. I'll be testing both the cables you get with the iron and then a proper 100-watt cable and power bank setup. Beginning with the included cables, the TS21 blazes to temp in 4 seconds flat. Fnirsi takes 8 seconds, which is great for such a large unit. Miniware 13 seconds. Alientek a terrible 46 seconds since it includes a dodgy USB A to C cable. And ANENG a terrible 60 seconds with its included cable. Now let's switch over to a proper 100-watt setup. The TS21 was down to just 3 seconds, followed by the Fnirsi at an astonishing 5 seconds, which is crazy fast for such a large iron. Then the TS101 at 6 seconds. Alientek has gone from 46 seconds to just 8 seconds with a proper cable. Biggest surprise was the super cheap ANENG SL108 went from 60 seconds with its included cable to just 9 seconds, hitting a genuine 100 watts. For a $25 iron, I'm pretty impressed. Test number 3, the XT60 beatdown. Let's try soldering some large XT60 plugs commonly used in RC models, drones, all that sort of stuff. So the deal with these is you've got to dump as much heat and solder into the plug as fast as possible before the whole thing melts and deforms. Now, keeping in mind, I've not done any real soldering in about 10 years, so you'll see some terrible XT60 plugs and connections here, folks. 2 of the iron failed to finish, a few made it really easy, others were more of a challenge. We'll review the results shortly when I check out each iron in detail. And finally, the last test, I left each iron on for 15 minutes to soak up the heat and see which ones could keep their handle cool and comfortable without getting hot. At least one iron suffered some heat creep, which I'll look at in a moment. Okay, so testing's done. Let's look at the results for each iron, then I'll chart them together so you can make a decision on which one's best for you. So first, the Miniware TS101, an evolution of the original TS100 that started this whole smart iron craze. It's tiny, light, and feels solid with almost an all-metal build. It takes cheap, widely available TS series tips, which you can just push in and take out. It heated up in 7 seconds with a 100-watt cable, pulling its full 100 watts of advertised power, an upgrade from the earlier versions that were limited to 45 watts. Keep in mind the included cable will do much less. My recommended cables are in the description. I was worried it would feel too small and awkward to hold, but I quite like it. No problem soldering LEDs and resistors and whatnot. My only complaint was the end of the tip does feel miles away, like all the TS100 type designs, but you get used to it pretty quickly. The only real negative for this one was its price. At $70 US, it was the most expensive iron that I bought. So the verdict on this one, a quality product, just what I'd expect from Miniware. Proven, reliable, cheap replacement cartridges, and a wide selection of tips, definitely quite short and small though, so if you've got big hands, maybe consider a larger iron, and if you do mostly larger stuff, I'd also consider a larger iron, since it worked fine on the XT60 test, but others just handled it a little bit better. Okay, next up, the Miniware TS21. So this brand new little mini beast is a high-powered monster in a tiny package. It hits 350 degrees Celsius or about 660 Fahrenheit in just 4 seconds, thanks to its JBC style C210 cartridges. It's all metal and has a clear LED screen and runs Miniware firmware, but it also supports the open source Iron OS. It performed well in all tests. Yes, the XT60 plug was a bit harder to solder using this tiny little tip, but it definitely did the job. Best suited for precision SMDs and through-hole stuff though, that's where it's at its best. Best part about this one is at just $37 plus tax and tariffs, I guess. The price is insane for 100-watt power and Miniware quality. Overall, top quality unit, high power. If you do precision work or love open source software, this is probably the one for you. Okay, next up, the Alientek T80P. Slightly larger iron, the T80P is probably as thin as the others, but it's a normal length, so it feels better to hold in my opinion, and the tip isn't miles out in front, so it just feels more natural. The included cable provided a dreadful 46 seconds to heat up. I've got no idea why they included a crappy USB-A cable with a decently powerful 65-watt iron. No engineer or anyone that used the product would have made that decision, so I have to think it was someone in the finance department or management. Get out of the way of your engineers and let them do their job properly. Good thing with this iron is once you get a decent cable, even a basic 65-watt one, it turns into a monster, heating up in just 8 seconds, providing almost as much grunt as the 100-watt models. Inside, it uses professional C245 JBC style cartridges, the same used on very expensive professional grade soldering stations. You can also buy the T80 without the P, which is the same iron, but it takes the C210 style cartridge, which are thinner, the same one used by the TS21. You might have noticed all the premium irons use these C245 or C210 JBC style cartridges. That's the 210. This one's the 245, which is great, but keep in mind they're a little bit more expensive, like about $14 each versus $8 each, and a little bit harder to find the exact tip that you like when compared with the older TS series cartridges, which have been around for longer. Back to the Alientek, and it aced the XT60 test and was just really nice to use when doing the kit work. The menu's simple and straightforward, no open source firmware stuff, but that's fine by me. Overall, look, this is a great iron, especially if you find the Miniwares to be a bit too small. This one's kind of in between the Miniwares and the larger irons. So far, this one's my favorite. It does max out at 72 watts though, so it's not using the latest 100-watt technology, which doesn't make a huge difference, but it's something to consider. Either way, so far it's my number one pick overall. Alright, moving on to the Fnirsi HS01A. The A, like this one, uses the larger 245 cartridges like this, and the B uses the smaller C210 style cartridges. So the Fnirsi's attracted a lot of attention for its aggressive styling, larger size, and this kick-ass metal case that's supplied with it. It's also got some pretty attractive pricing. Now, when a company sends me a unit and I actually like it, it can be hard to explain what I like about it without coming off as another YouTuber shilling a product they know nothing about. So I usually go even harder at pointing out its flaws. So let's talk about what's wrong with the HS02A. Well, if you've got tiny hands, you're probably going to have issues wrapping your little digits around it since it's got so much raw girth. Apart from that, it's USB-C only, so it doesn't have the additional option of a DC barrel plug input like the older TS100 style irons. However, none of the more modern 100-watt irons have that. They're all USB-C, just like this, so I can only imagine those complaints are probably coming from TS100 or the Pinecil fanatics. In terms of power, Tom's Hardware said this was the fastest iron they'd ever tested, which means they haven't tested very many. But yes, as a biggish 100-watt iron using JBC style cartridges, it does heat up very quickly, like 8 seconds with the included cable or 6 seconds with a 100-watt one. It did really well soldering the XT60 connector, and despite its size, it had no ergonomic problems when doing the smaller through-hole kits. However, that's a kind of personal thing. Some people like them bigger, some people like them smaller. The other thing I like about this is the case that comes with the more premium bundles. It's seriously solid and has a bunch of features like this built-in stand, so you can avoid putting a soldering iron down on the floor and burning a soldering iron shaped mark on your mum's carpet like I did way too many times as a kid. It's also got this tip cleaner here and a bunch of solder, and it stores all of your tips in the top here, really handy. Overall, the Fnirsi HS02A is my favourite so far, along with the Alientek T80P. Moving on to the budget models, the ANENG SL108 96 watts. The biggest surprise with this was the fact that it really does pull its claimed 96 watts. In fact, it'll do 100, a heat up time of 60 seconds with a terrible included cable, or just 9 seconds if you use a proper 100 watt job. Now this iron sells for just $25 plus tax, which is an absolute bargain. The other cost saving with this one is the use of older style Hakko T12 tips. Look at the size of that thing, which means you'll have plenty of tip selection and they're pretty cheap to buy. Using it for that XT60 plug, it performed as well as you'd expect for a 100 watt iron, which was pretty decent. The LED kit was also good, though doing smaller stuff is when we start to see its weaknesses. This thing is big, even bigger than the Fnirsi, which it seems to be copying style-wise. So if you're against larger irons, this one isn't for you. But if you don't mind, then I think you might like it, especially if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend ridiculous money on something you're only going to use a couple of times a year. And sure, the build quality is a bit plasticky, but if you don't want to spend crazy money on a bit of metal that gets hot, then I think you'll really like this. Okay, now getting really cheap. The CS200S is battery-powered convenience for a rock-bottom price. I've seen it for as low as $6.50 on sale. Being fully cordless is its killer feature, so no cable required. It's got an internal battery. Heats up in about 35 seconds, which is not too bad, and seems to work okay for simple jobs, at least at first. The tip is freaking tiny though, like you're soldering with a needle. Beginning to work on the XT60, I was starting to think that, yeah, this will do the job, even if it was a bit harder than the others. And then it turned off. You see, it only lasts about 10 minutes, and I'd spent 8 of those minutes buggering around with plugs and cables. With 90 minutes to charge up again, I called the XT60 test a straight up fail. I mean, sure, you could take this with you out in the field, but you better be bloody sure what you wanted to do with it, because the clock's ticking, dude.
The clock's ticking, dude.
It also feels like crap when holding it, and the tips are proprietary, and it seems like you can't buy them separately. So overall, this is a disposable piece of junk that I do not recommend. Okay, let's do the Pinecil, the fake Pinecil. So initial impressions of this were that it's tiny and very light. I mean, it's the same as the TS101, but it feels more janky, I think because the tip wobbles quite a bit, and that's not just the clone, the original does this too, because you're supposed to screw it down the top here, and on the bottom. It's a first generation design. They all had screws on them, which just kind of sucks. Anyway, on to the good things. The little OLED screen is very, very detailed and has a very sophisticated menu system, which I suspect could be Iron OS. It heats up reasonably fast, but still noticeably slower than most of the others at around 20 seconds with the original cable that you pay extra for. Like the TS101 though, it takes both USB-C and it's got a DC jack. Also like the TS101, it uses TS style cartridges, which are cheap and plentiful. Performance on the XT60 plug was actually pretty good, though the tip again seems very far away. In any case, the price of this thing, even the genuine one, is quite cheap. It'll run the latest Iron OS open source firmware. Overall, it's a first generation smart iron. I can see why they still sell so many of these. I'd recommend the TS101 over this one though for sure. It's just more solid, much higher temperature and consistency. So either get that, which is this one, the TS101, or buy the actual genuine Pinecil V2 that should be better. Link in the description to their official website. Okay, so finally this thing which is sold everywhere online. I picked this up while on holiday to help me build the Tamiya Super Clodbuster because it was all that was available, and I mean, yeah, it did the job. A good thing about this one though is it uses the 510 interface, so you can find replacement tips fairly easily, just like this one. Though, as I've already alluded to, this soldering iron is often used for other purposes, to heat things up that I can't mention without the algorithm getting mad at me. As for how it works, well, it totally sucks with anything large. I gave up trying with XT60. It just seems like it couldn't get hot enough. It was moving the solder around. It was just terrible. Through-hole stuff was more bearable, but I'd still not recommend it. Overall, I'd say stay away from these. If you've got one and you had a different experience with the newer models, let me know in the comments. Okay, so here's the specs and test results for all the irons on one page. Hit pause if you'd like to check it out for a bit longer. Moving on, this is how I scored each iron, and the best all-rounder, if you're not sure what you like, I'd recommend getting the Alientek T80P. It's not too big and not too small and is well made and uses pro-grade tips. It's got plenty of power at 72 watt with a super fast heat up time, and it's very popular, so you'll find plenty of people talking about it and support online. It ticks all the boxes for me, except I wish it came with a case, though you can buy third-party ones. Link in the description if you'd like to buy it and support the channel. Of course, for the complete package, I'd recommend the Fnirsi HS01A. It's seriously powerful, it's comfortable to hold if you don't mind the slightly larger ones, the screen's awesome, it comes with a genuinely useful metal case, it keeps everything tidy, and the price can be very cheap, especially if you don't need the power brick. Link is in the description. For precision work, or if you like open source, the Miniware TS21 is very impressive. If you do smaller work, absolutely the TS21 is your pick. It's brand new, top quality, and incredibly powerful, and it's well priced. The TS101 is also great and has cheaper tips, but it's got a much higher upfront cost compared to the TS21. Now, for the occasional job, look, the ANENG SL108 is unbeatable value. 100 watts of power for only 25 bucks. Yes, it is quite large, but it works much better than I expected. The tips are cheap and common. It's got a nice big screen that's easy to see what's going on. Comes with a little case. For the money, this is way better than anything I used to use, better than the gas ones easily. It's my cheap and cheerful bargain pick. Now, I'm sure there are other cheapies out there which are also good. We'll take a look at them next time, so please suggest them in the comments if you've got any ideas. Well, that's all I've got time for today. I hope you learned something. I definitely did, as always. If you like this kind of content, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'm only a tiny channel, so it really helps me out. So take care of yourself, be cool, be kind, and I'll see you next time.